Good morning. My name is Sean, and I'm an alcoholic. Uh, mm, what a privilege this has been. I want to thank you guys. Being a retreat master, or retreat leader, or whatever the hell I am, is a two-way street. I come to these things to listen to you guys as much as you're forced to sit and listen to me. And I've really got some stuff to take home, and I want to thank you. We've talked about the steps over the weekend. We've talked about the fact that we get to build our own house and be the architect of it, and that has certainly happened in my life. But the end of the 12 step talks about practicing these principles in all our affairs. And there comes a time in Alcoholics Anonymous when everything that we learn here, we got to take out there. There's a big book talks about the fact that this program is designed to restore us to normal life. And I told you about the crisis that I hit in my life when I was 5 years sober, and the fact that I had to rebuild my life and rebuild my program and go back to the basics and look at who I am. And at some point, all of us have to eventually take all the stuff that we learn here and say, all right, who am I? What are my principles? What do I believe in? What are my personal boundaries? What are my morals? Who am I? About that time in my life, between about 5 and 8 years of sobriety, I got involved in service. I mean, it was typical. I accidentally got to be the general service rep for my meeting. I don't know how it happened, but all of a sudden I was there. And I started going to those dumb meetings, the politics in Alcoholics Anonymous, where where every time anybody mentioned prudent reserve, everybody went nuts. And, or singled as a purpose. And my God, there was 3 hours of discussion. I mean, it was just crazy. And planning conventions and, getting on committees like, that do these kind of things. And I thought, oh my God, it's like belonging to the Elks Club. And, but a strange thing happened to me. What happened to me by getting involved in service at that level, in general service, was that I came to understand that collectively, while my sobriety is the central issue of my life, it's the springboard for everything. Collectively, your sobriety is more important than mine is. That without you, I couldn't survive. I can't stay sober. I constantly need to interact with you guys, so that I get to see I can't see myself. I can only see myself mirrored in you. And that's part of I guess that's part of it's part of the effects of the disease. I don't know. Introspection has not been too terrific for me. I get confused when I go inward. But if it's bouncing off you, then I can see it. If I can see your progress, I can start to see mine. And I started getting involved with the traditions, and when you read the traditions at a meeting, everybody starts to zone out. Everybody's getting, the traditions at the end of the meeting, you can always hear the keys rattling as people are getting ready to go to the parking lot, or chattering about where they're going to go for coffee. And I started listening to the traditions and starting to try and figure out how they apply to me personally, not just to the group. And over the years, I realized that I was kind of living the traditions in my own life, but that I hadn't really articulated how I did that. And over the last couple of years, I've started to talk about taking the traditions home, because we all got to take this home. We got to take it home. We got to take it to the workplace. We got to take it everywhere in our lives. So what I wanted to discuss and share with you in this last session is a way of using the traditions in the family life and how I use them, and maybe you can find something that you can use. Tradition 1 is our family's common welfare should come first. Personal recovery is aided by family unity. And what I've done with these things is kind of I ask myself a series of questions about these traditions and see how I answer them to see how I'm doing. At first in recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous, the entire family's focus is on the most injured party, and the most injured party and the one that is in the most desperate trouble is the one that's the alcoholic. And a lot of times what happens is all the attention focuses on that member, in our case, the man of the house, and everybody kind of walks around on eggshells and worries about us and all that kind of stuff, and all the attention is at us. And at some point in recovery, we got to say, wait a minute, what's going on with the rest of the family? in alcoholic relationships, people get lost. I mean, there are children that get lost. There are children that take on jobs that children shouldn't take on, managing households and taking care of other children and taking care of the parents and all that kind of stuff. If it's a family, if it's a husband and wife where a husband goes into Alcoholics Anonymous and the wife goes into Al-Anon, a separation occurs. It happens with every couple that goes into recovery. Sometimes they physically separate. In our case, we stayed under the same roof and separated, and it was a god-awful process that we went through when Bonnie started getting involved in Al-Anon because she started changing. And I was terrified of Al-Anon and resentful of Al-Anon because I was always afraid that she was going to grow up and leave me. That at some point she was going to get well enough to say, what am I doing with this horse's ass? And Al-Anon was teaching her principles that scared the hell out of me. I mean, release looked like rejection to me. I mean, it sure felt like it. Detachment felt like disinterest, And while she was trying to find out who she was and I was trying to find out who I was, it was a nightmare. I went to my sponsor very early in my sobriety. I was in the first couple of months, and I said, I think the most loving thing I can do is to divorce this woman. We've done far too much damage to each other. She found a program, I found a program. Why don't we just pack this thing in and go our separate ways? And he said, you're not going to make any emotional decisions in your first year of sobriety. And I said, what the hell does that mean? And he said, that means you're not going to leave your wife. You're not going to fall in love with anybody else. You're not going to quit your job. You're not going to change careers. You're not going to lose 35 pounds. You're not going to quit smoking. You're not going to start jogging 10 miles a day. You're not going to redecorate. You're not going to buy a car. You're not going to do a goddamn thing. You're going to put your entire life on hold, and you're going to work the program and the steps, and you're going to go to a lot of meetings, and you're going to get sober, and it takes about a year. And I said, but you don't understand. I'm not sure that I love this woman. Then he said, I don't give a damn about love. Work on good manners. And so I started saying please and thank you to my wife. Now, I found out years later, we were, I guess about 3 or 4 years into the program, and we were asked to share at a meeting together. Oh, if you want an experience of a lifetime, share a podium with your wife in Al-Anon. And she told her story, which I didn't recognize. I found a great thing in that thing. I found out there's my truth and her truth. And sometimes they're not the same, but they're both the truth. And I found out that she had gone to her sponsor and said the same thing. And her sponsor said, don't make any emotional decisions in your first 6 months of Al-Anon. No, I'd never understood why we get a year sentence and they get 6 months. But that's what it felt like to me. And what happened is our family was very disunified. Our family was going, it had come apart. It had literally come apart, and it wasn't for the guidance of sponsorship and the experience of these programs, we would have divorced. I would have missed a 25-year trip. I'd have made the wrong decision. But at some point after working these steps, we got to look at the family. We got to look at who is in this family, and does this family understand what the hell is going on? Does this family understand why dad disappears 5 nights a week and comes back? Has this family ever been to an open AA meeting to see what goes on, to understand what goes on? Has that ever happened? Have the people in recovery in the family sat down with the rest of the family and say, these are the kind of principles we're trying to live with. This is what we're trying to do. This is the direction we're going in. Let's try to get everybody to understand this. So there's a unified view of what's going on. The second tradition is for our family purpose. There's but one ultimate authority, a loving God, as he may express himself in our family's group conscience. Parents are but trusted servants. They do not govern. What I got to look at is, has some member of the family become the ultimate authority? Am I still holding myself up to be the end all and be all of what this family is going to do, by God? I got to look at our other members of the family's ideas and perceptions and opinions being acknowledged and recognized. And parents and elders are but trusted servants. As a parent, I got to lead by example. I got to walk like I talk, or it had absolutely nothing to do with being a parent. It's being a dictator otherwise. And let me tell you, it's been a really interesting trip becoming a father. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. I've learned how to be a husband from you guys. I went to the husbands in Alcoholics Anonymous and said, how do you be a husband? And they told me. When it became clear that I was about to become a father, I went to the father, to the alcoholic, and I said, "How do you be a father? How do you be a father?" You know. My sponsor one time told me that he sat down with his 2 teenage daughters and said, "What kind of father do you want me to be?" And I just did that with my daughter. You know, how would you like me to be as your father? But children who have no communication skills, children who don't know the language or have limited language abilities, don't communicate by language. They communicate by feel. They communicate by observation. They watch attitudes and body language and all that kind of stuff. They don't know that's what they're doing, but that's what they react to. And so it's my responsibility to take these principles home, to walk like I talk. And I'm pretty good at it sometimes. Sometimes I'm really lousy. I got to look at, am I abusive of my authority? I'm the tallest one in my family, you know? And the easiest thing to do with that kid of mine when she was little was just slap her on the ass to get her to do what I wanted to do. But I was taught by the men in Alcoholics Anonymous that sober men don't hit people. And so I had to figure out what I had to do with my daughter when she was doing something that I didn't want her to do. And what you guys taught me was to give her another choice. If she was doing something that I didn't want her to do, to give her another choice of an activity, to get her to do that. That I didn't kick the feet out from under it. I didn't slap her, that I didn't yell at her to stop her. I didn't do that kind of stuff. I didn't humiliate her. I didn't take away that kind of dignity she needed to do. And man, is it been hard. It's easier to just do that, you know? It's just easier to just whack up. The hardest thing is to take the time to be a parent. And that's what I constantly have to look at. Am I a parent that leads by example, or do I attempt to govern? You know? And the third one is the only requirement for family membership is a desire to be part of the family. You know, relatives, if they gather together for mutual support, are family. You know, I've got family members. I've also got people that I'm related to who are not family members. You know, and I got family members who I'm not related to. I've got family members in Alcoholics Anonymous. People who know exactly what direction my life is going in and how we're trying to live it and are supportive of it and understand it. And in emergency and in crisis, they're there. I've got relatives who aren't, who don't understand it, don't want to understand it, don't want to know anything about it. And that's fine. They remain relative. But the close ones, the people that I rely on, the family, are the ones that are mutually supported. And while my sobriety comes first, am I supportive of my family's well-being as I am, as much of my family's well-being as my own growth and recovery? Am I supportive of my wife's Al-Anon program? You know, when my wife's Al-Anon program butts up against my wants and needs, you know, am I supportive of it? When I first got sober, almost 23 years ago in Southern California, at an open meeting, they'd say, "Are there any Al-Anon members?" And the Al-Anons would stick up their hands, and guys in AA would go, you know. And it was that half in fun and whole in earnest thing, you know. And man, there were a lot of guys who did a lot of put-down stuff on Al-Anon, you know, a lot of put-down stuff because they were being challenged. Yeah. And I was being challenged by my wife. I remember in my first year of sobriety, I was acting like a horse's ass. I mean, just a jerk in the kitchen, yelling and screaming and stomping around. My wife isn't very big. She's about this tall. When she hasn't got any shoes on, she comes up to about here. And when she's angry, she tends to get real close to me and look right up at me. And this little angry face looking up at me makes me laugh, which is not a great idea, you know. And I was just acting like a jerk. And she came charging into the kitchen and got right up against me and said, "This behavior is unacceptable." Now, it was this weird phrase that she'd learned in Al-Anon, and it was so weird that I stopped doing whatever I was doing. I don't even know what it was that I was doing. I do know I've never done it again. Yeah. Because what I knew was that something had really shifted here. You know, something had shifted, that was an immovable statement. It was something that she had learned in Al-Anon. It was something that I didn't particularly like, but by God, I respected it. And I got to look at that. Do I respect their recovery? Do I respect the things that they got to go through? And my kids are in Alateen. Do I respect their recovery? Do I support it? Now, if a family member doesn't support the family principles, do we have the courage to ask them to leave? I know a lot of guys in this fellowship who've got, you know, teenager or young kids who are, you know, practicing, you know, or doing a lot of stuff that's absolutely opposed to what the family believes in. And I mean, there comes a point where, you know, sometimes you guys say, "I'm sorry you can't live here anymore." And those are some of the toughest things I've seen in Alcoholics Anonymous. Really tough stuff. Yeah. The other thing is I got to look at is that if I can't support what my family believes in, if they're going off in a direction that's dangerous to my sobriety or something that I'm opposed to, do I have the courage to leave? And sometimes leaving a marriage or leaving a family requires as much courage as staying. They're all individual. I mean, those kind of changes for guys like us, changes require courage. We're not good at changes. Each family member is autonomous except in matters affecting other members of the family or the community as a whole. Again, do I acknowledge the individual rights of the family members? When we moved to Vancouver, it was very important for me business-wise. Bonnie had a very good job, and Kate was 5 years old. Now, we were moving to another country, and while it was a real good deal for us, what happened is our family went to Vancouver 6 months before this thing was to happen, and we stayed in Vancouver for a week and went through that city, looked at it, found out about it, toured around, looked at neighborhoods and all that kind of stuff, and then we sat down and as a family said, okay, are we going to make this move? Is it good for you? Is it good for, Kate had discovered a water park, so we were home free with her. But she had an opinion, She got to give her opinion about whether we were going to do that. And Bonnie got to give her opinion. She wanted to move. It was time to move. Do I have a live and let live attitude with other members of the family? I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting watching a child grow. In my case, watching my daughter grow, allowing her to make mistakes, allowing her to be who she wants to be, to go after her own interests. She's very, very athletic. I've never been particularly athletic. I got the worst hand-eye coordination in the world, And Kate was born when I was almost 40 years old, and I said, thank God, a daughter. I'm never gonna have to learn how to play baseball. And so it turns out she's a jock. So I'm out in my backyard with my mitt and my baseball. She's saying, "You throw like a girl, Dad. It's really swell." I'm catching her, the balls that she's throwing at me. Yeah, damn. And but I gotta allow her to be who she wants to be, to explore, to make those kind of mistakes, and be there for it. And also, can we disagree without being disagreeable? I mean, we're bumping up against that kind of stuff. Now I got a teenage daughter who wants to do some stuff, wants to go places and be places, and when we get into kind of unsupervised activities that, make me nervous, and sometimes there's things that she gets into that have consequences. And what I got to be able to do is calmly point out consequences. If you do this, honey, this is what's going to happen. This kind of activity has this kind of consequence. And to allow kind of times what we do as a family is if something comes up, we try not to get involved in the emotion. I told you when Fate got loaded that time, we didn't do anything that night. We let everybody go to bed, and then we discussed it the next day when everybody kind of okay about it, and everybody had kind of time to think about it. What happened to us so many times in the drinking years with Bonnie and I, and also at the beginning before we learned this technique, was that the disagreement would escalate in something that was just bizarre, and so what we try to do is to kind of diffuse that kind of thing. Our family is self-governing, except in matters that affect the community or what the general laws are. Number 5, our family has but one primary purpose: to be mutually supportive of one another. And what I got to look at is am I helping my family fulfill its purpose and attain its goal? My wife has a very, very complicated job. She manages the jewelry store in Vancouver, and what they're looking at her for is some obviously some management stuff. She's very, very good at what she does, and what they're asking her to do is stuff that's taking time away. And we're having a time in our life when we don't see much of each other, and when we do see each other, we're exhausted. I'm working hard. She's working hard. Kate at school and after school activities, and we're all crazy about each other. And finding the time for each other is really, really difficult. And I sometimes get upset that she doesn't have enough time for me, and being being supportive in what she's doing is sometimes really intervene. The other thing, being mutually supportive is in a family, are we tolerating physical, verbal, emotional, or sexual abuse? I mean, there's those kind of things that are going on in family. There's those kind of things that are going on in families in Alcoholics Anonymous, And I got to look at it and say, by not acknowledging it, and I'm supporting it. What's happening in this family? Are we being mutually supportive? Are we helping each other to achieve and become the best human beings we can be? Am I comforting and encouraging family members who are in AA, Al-Anon, and Alatate? We took Kate to Alatate, to go to some Alatate meetings, and what she said was, "Dad, I don't know what to tell you, but I've never lived through. I was born a long time after you got sober. I've never lived through any of that stuff. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't understand it. I don't identify with it." And I said, "Okay." And I got to look at it. Am I carrying the message at work? Am I carrying the message of my family members? Am I carrying the message of my community? Number 6, our family ought never endorse, finance, or lend the family name to any related facility or outside enterprise without the consent of the other family members, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert the family from its primary purpose. Our family's primary purpose is spiritual in nature. That's what you've taught me. You've taught me that in order for me to survive, in order for me to grow, in order for me to recover, to be sober, I've got to embrace spiritual principles. Bonnie is involved in Al-Anon, which is the same thing. I mean, we basically have some spiritual principles in our home that we're living by. And what happens is we also live in a society that's very consumer and very goal oriented and very materialistic, and sometimes they keep bouncing up against each other. And sometimes we got to look at our time management. I mean, what is this family trying to do? Are we getting so involved in outside issues that it diverts us from our primary spiritual aim? I mean, what am I trying to accumulate here? For what purpose? Do I commit the family to activities without their consent? I mean, I've done that on Todd. I've told him, we're going to this AA picnic. As a family, we're going to, we're doing this, without ever asking them. First of all, what's your schedule like? If you got time, do you want to do it? Do I lend money without consulting my partner? I've done that, and sometimes it's caused some problems. Is the pursuit of money, property, and prestige diverting the family from its spiritual well-being and its relationship to God? Working 7 days a week and 18 hours a day on this new business. At times, I've had to stop and ask myself that question. And there are times that I've had to stop and go out and get and pick up a noon meeting, or in the middle of a business meeting, take a call from a guy who's in trouble. Because I got to look at my primary thing. My primary thing is my sobriety. Without my sobriety, I don't have anything that I'm working at 18 hours a day. I don't have a family. I don't have anything. Our family ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. I got to look at, am I financially responsible? There were times in early sobriety when I had money in the bank and bills, I didn't pay them. I couldn't do it for some reason. I mean, I was just so irresponsible. Is my immaturity and grandiosity putting my family in financial trouble? I've done that, I mean, when I go shopping Kate loves going shopping with her dad. She hates going shopping with her mother. Because her mother says, if Kate finds something, her mother says, how much does it cost? Her father says, how many colors does it come in? And I got to watch that. I mean, I can all of a sudden find myself with a cashmere sports jacket. I just find myself with a cashmere sports jacket and a telephone bill that needs to be paid. And the cashmere sports jacket wins a lot of times. One of the things that we had to do as far as this 7th step, as far as financial maturity, was Bonnie and I had to sit down together at the 1st and the 15th of the month, bring out all the bills and bring out the checkbook and pay them together. Because what I was doing was I was giving her that responsibility, And what was happening was I was then getting resentful that there wasn't enough money. I was getting her to manage the finances and then criticizing the way she managed it. And she said, wait a minute, hold it. We're going to do this together. And I got to tell you something. I'm a world-class pouter. I mean, it's really unattractive in a guy my height. Um, man, I bring the check home, and then we write all the other checks, and there's nothing left, and I go to my room. You know, I don't know why I'm working so hard. It's just stupid, So what we've had to do is sit down, and we do it on a regular basis. We do a budget. Exactly how much is going out, how much is coming in, and how much there is to spare, When I find out I've got a couple of $100 in play money, then I'm okay. As long as I know that, But when I don't know it, when it's all mysterious to me, or when somebody else is handling it, I got nothing but resentment. We're starting to do that with Kate, so that Kate has some understanding of where money comes from and where it goes. Difficult to get that through to a teenager, but we're doing that. If I must accept outside contributions from individuals to support my family temporarily, do I have a plan to pay them back? That's a big one for me because, as I told you before, I lent my sponsor a lot of money. And my sponsor was supposed to pay it back, and he never did. I ended up suing my former sponsor. It was really swell. A really high point in my sobriety. Nothing came of it, but I had to do it. We had to put some kind of finalization on it. And lending money in Alcoholics Anonymous is really, really weird. It can get to be a real problem. And what I've had to do if somebody comes to me in Alcoholics Anonymous and needs money, if I've got money to give, I will give it. But I have to talk to my wife first, my family first. Can I afford to give Joe $1,000? Let's look at the budget. Can we afford to do that? If we can afford to do it, we do it. If Joe pays us back, that's terrific. If Joe doesn't, that's the way it is. I have also been in a situation where there's been a decent, where there's been a fairly substantial amount of money that was a loan, but we have sat down and written out a contract between the two of us with interest and when it's to be repaid and all that kind of stuff. It's the only way to do it, so that I don't start seeing you in a meeting and you owe me money and I just start resenting you, because I haven't seen a check or I haven't seen $10 to pay it back. I haven't seen any of that kind of stuff. One of the difficult things with my sponsor, the sponsor who owed me the money, was he was the one who taught me when I first made my amends to put $10 a month into an envelope and set it up a few buttons, and yet he didn't do it. If I must accept outside contributions from government agencies, am I making every effort to be self-supporting? Yeah. A lot of guys in Alcoholics Anonymous are skimming a lot of cash out of the government. And that is, I've been on UI in sobriety. I'm on unemployment, being a big time circuit speaker in line, to pick up my UI check. And what I had to do in those circumstances was while I was picking up my UI check, my job was to find a job circuit, and doing everything every day to go find employment, to do what I do. The thing that was impressed upon me in Alcoholics Anonymous is God doesn't care what I do for a living, and so I've done some pretty weird stuff, to put food on the table and to be self-supporting. Do I openly and honestly discuss financial matters with my partner? Yeah, I got it. I mean, we've got to do that. And in this particular thing with this business thing, there's been a lot of personal money that's gone into this business, and every step of the way, Bonnie and I have had to sit down and talk about this, and talk about how scared we are. I mean, Bonnie says, "Listen, I support you absolutely all the way, but I got to tell you, this really frightens me." And I say, "I understand, honey. It really frightens me too, but this is the way I see it, and tell me what you see." And so this thing of me investing our future into a business is not my decision. And I can't make it my decision. It's not a unilateral decision because it affects our entire family. Kate said it's okay as long as I earn enough money back so she can go to Harvard. So, yeah. The other thing I got to look at in the seventh step is everybody in my family emotionally self-supported. I think one of the most important things that AA and Al-Anon has taught Bonnie and I is that we do not need each other. We want to be with each other. I've never met anybody else that I liked more than her. I stopped looking. I know no longer comparison shop, what, she was a redhead like that, or, I don't do that. But we don't need each other. If if something happened in our lives and she wasn't in my life, I'd be okay. I'd miss her, but I'd be okay. And she'd miss me, but she'd be okay too. And it's been really, really important for us to do that. One of the things that happened probably in her second year of Al-Anon was she took a series of courses, seminar courses on financial independence for women. It's amazing how many of our women are financially crippled that depend on us totally. And what she did during that process was she established her own credit. She got her own credit cards. She got her own credit rating. Forced me to sit down and actually do a will. We were, I was in my 30s. I thought it was premature, but we did it. She has signing authority on my checking account. She has signing authority on my checking account because, as she said, you got a terminal disease, Sean. And if you get drunk tomorrow, you could devastate this family. I got to be able to have access to that. And so she, all our checking accounts have both our signatures on me. I got no hidden asset. Here are equal partners, and if anything happens to me, she's financially, totally functioning. We're teaching that to Kate too, how to be financially independent, how to manage money, and how to do that kind of stuff. She's 14 years old. It's time to learn. In family matters, number 8, I should remain forever non-professional, but our family may employ special workers. I got to look at, do I lead by the power of example instead of giving unsolicited advice? Do I recognize that I am not a professional counselor or resident expert? I get to do this kind of stuff a lot and sponsor a lot of guys, and I understand these things. And what happens to us, to guys like me, occasionally is we get a little arrogant about what we know and how we can solve everybody's problem. And I don't want to be one of those horses' asses that sits around my family and tells them how they should live their lives. What's good for them and what's not good for them. So I'm not the resident expert. In matters in which I have no experience or insufficient knowledge, do I have enough humility to recommend experts, to refer people to doctors, to counselors, to teachers, to financial advisors, to specialists, people who know a hell of a lot more than I do. Do I have enough humility to do that? And sometimes I don't, until I get called up. But when we get into this thing in Alcoholics Anonymous of getting weller than well, we get really dangerous. And I got to look at that. Number 9, our family as such ought never be organized, though we do have responsibilities toward each other. Is the equality of the family, our family membership is sustained by order, balance, and division of responsibility. A couple of years back, I went to my sponsor. Kate's room looks like there's been a series of burglaries. I mean, it is unbelievable how anybody can live like that. And it was making both of us nuts. Bonnie was screaming at her to get her room cleaned up, and I would occasionally, do my father loud voice, which is just absolute bullshit, and nothing was going anywhere, So I went to my sponsor, and my sponsor is, well, I hope you feel about your sponsor the way I feel about Murray. I just love this guy. And I love his kindness and his wisdom, and he loves me. And I know that because he tells me all the time. But he loves Bonnie, he especially loves Kay. He just thinks they're the best. And so I said, Milton, I don't know what to do about this fountain. He said, close the door. And what? She said, close the door to the room. You don't have to look at it. I said, but that's too simple. He said, of course, close the door. He said, Kate can live in her room any way she wants. You can live in your room anywhere you want. The common rooms in the house have to be neat and clean. So we went to Kate. Said, okay, you live anywhere you want in your room, but the common rooms have to be clean. He said, that's a deal, Dad. It's great. It's absolutely wonderful. I closed the door to her room. I don't have to look at it. Occasionally, she cleaned it. He's incredible. Occasionally, because she runs out of clothes, so she picks up everything on the floor and washes them. And it takes an entire weekend. But hey, that's the way she wants to live. That's the way she wants to live. Our family, Our family is not dominated by one human being. I got to look at that and keep that in balance. Sometimes do I try to attempt to control or dominate other family members by tightly organizing your activity? That's one of the things I get into. Boy, you can, figure out what we're going to do the next week and, keep everybody in line. And man, it'll make you crazy if it makes me crazy. Our family has no opinion on outside issues. Number 10. Hence, the family ought never be drawn into public controversy. We have no opinion based on race, creed, religion, economics, anything else. That's because of the fellowship. And then the most incredible thing about this fellowship and Kate's exposure to it since she was born in the fellowship is that she has lived and is in contact with every socioeconomic group, every religion, it's incredible. My group up in there's one time we were talking about the third step at a step meeting in Vancouver. And in this group, there was a Chinese guy who was Buddhist, a Sikh, myself, a couple of Jews. It was a whole bunch of us talking about God. It was absolutely incredible. And everybody was just kind of sharing their own kind of concept of it. Oh, God, no, God. Well, what a lucky man. What an incredibly lucky man to have this wealth of knowledge and this kind of stuff being talked about with nobody having a fist fight of it. And these people are guests in our house. My sponsor, Black, is like the Chinese. They're our best friend. They're in our house all the time. There's people who are, coming out of detox who are sitting there shaking it out and out of fiction and that kind of stuff. So the idea of having any opinion, we were talking about religions and talking about, finding God through religion here. And the neat thing is that I really can tell you I got no opinion on that. However you do that's up to you. And the wonderful thing is you got that same tolerance toward me as to what my spiritual life is. The currency in the relationships in our family are on the inside. They're not on the outside. They're not based on that. They're based on kind of spiritual achievement rather than actual, material or anything else. And because of that, we just got no opinion. We just got no opinion on how other people live their lives. If a family member becomes involved in a public controversy, has she discussed it with the rest of the family? There have been times when Bonnie was the public information person for Southern California area assembly of Alana, and was invited to appear on the Today Show. They were having a thing about about children of alcoholics and people who were related to alcoholics, and they had contacted Southern California group and had asked her to appear on the show, and before she accepted it, she came to me and said, "They've asked me to do this. Do you have any objection to it? Because if anybody recognizes me and knows who I am, I'm blowing your anonymity." Now, that made no difference at all to me, but what was absolutely wonderful was that she asked the question. I was really honored that she asked that question. She didn't have to, but she asked it. And as it happened, a couple of people did recognize her, but it wasn't any big deal, but it was really terrific that was happening. 11, our family's public relation policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need to always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, TV, and films. I constantly have to look at us, and our family does. Do we walk like we talk? Do we walk like we talk? Kate was about 5 years old one time, and she had not told me the truth about something, and I said, Kate, we don't lie in this family. She said, I know, rigorous honesty. And I discovered that Kate, I discovered a pack of cigarettes in Kate's knapsack not long ago. And said, Kate, what's going on? She said, I don't smoke that much, but don't tell Mom. And I said, okay, I won't, because I expect probably within the next couple of months you will tell. And so I respected her request based on the fact that she was going to face up to it. And she did. She kind of let it drop with her mother, and her mother didn't react. Her mother worked her Al-Anon programs, and her dad Great. 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our family, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. And occasionally what I got to look at, occasionally the principles of this fellowship and the things that we've learned, the idea of live and let go and let God and living one day at a time, bump up against what society is teaching us, that we should be achievers, that we should possess a whole lot of stuff, that we should be, financially secure based on our own accumulation. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff sometimes, and there are great raging kind of conflicts in Alcoholics Anonymous of, do I lie at a beach and turn it over to God to find me a job, or do I go look for a job? I mean, these kind of Zen kind of discussions we have at a lotto clubs at noon. Uh, you know, uh, you know, can I drive a Rolls and be spiritually fit? No, I'd like to take that one on. Yeah. But a lot of times, what we're taught here and how we're trying to lead our lives, give the illusion that we're bumping up against what society bases success on, and at times we have to make choices. At times, it's highly inconvenient to live by the principles we taught here. I remember filling out an insurance policy, and the insurance policy said, have you ever had any problems with alcohol and drugs? And I talked to my good member of that, and he put that on the insurance policy, and bam, I got it. But I mean, it would have been much easier to shine it on. It's really inconvenient at times to be sober, because there's a lot of stuff that interferes with what I want to do. I mean, there's guys that are calling you at 2:00 in the morning. There's 12-step work to be done. There's commitments to meetings. There's all kinds of things, that I sometimes have to make choices of. So what I got to look at is what is important to me. Am I placing principles before personality by treating all members of the family equally? And are the principles of honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness being practiced? Anonymity, as they talk about it in the big book, is a spiritual principle. And what it is that I give up my need to distinguish myself either within the fellowship or out there. That I give up the need to call attention to myself. How am I doing? How am I doing? Look at me. How am I doing? Instead of just suiting up and showing up. And to allow you to be whoever you got to be without imposing me on you. In a family life, it's, I got to tell you, I've got a family life now that is, it's beyond anything that I deserve. First of all, we have two very, very strong programs being worked in our family, and we also have a child who's been raised on the principles. A child who has absolute self-confidence in herself. She announced to me one day that she was the best artist in her class, and I said, "Gee, honey, who told you that?" She looked at me and she said, "No one." I mean, I wish I had that kind of self-confidence. God, her sense of herself is extraordinary, and it's the gift that you've taught me. You've taught me how to be a father. You've taught me how to treat her. A couple of months ago, she came bounding into our bedroom, jumped up on her bed, and we were talking away, and she started to talk about her friends who are getting involved in some sexual activity. Bonnie and I are sitting there, and she's talking about some of her friends and what they're doing, and one of them is having sex with her boyfriend, one of her 14-year-old friend. Unprotected sex with her boyfriend. And so I, what always goes through me, this information that I'm not ready for is being told to me. Going through the back of my head is, God, give me the words. Just give me the words. Just, let me react appropriately to this. And so I said, honey, you don't have to have sex with anybody unless you want to. But if you do want to, and if it's an appropriate thing to do, I really hope that you will be responsible and do the appropriate kind of protection things. And she said, "Oh, don't worry, Dad. No glove, no love." And then she bounced off her bed and went to her room. Bonnie and I are sitting there. I looked at her. I said, "Have you ever had a discussion like this with anybody?" She said, "I can't talk to you like that, you know." Yeah. But the fact that we had the conversation is the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon working in our lives. The fact that as a family we can talk about whatever we got to talk about. That the people in the family are not going to react; they're going to respond. And like it or not, standing here today in front of you, everything that I believe in, the man that I am, is what you've taught me. I am a product of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a good example or a lousy example, depending on where you're coming from, and depending on what day you see me. But I got to tell you that I am enormously proud to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe there is incredible power in these rooms. If you're new here and you find the power in it, be careful of rejecting it. Be careful of rejecting it, because it'll send you on a spiral that you may not recover from. There truly are angels in the architecture here. You know, there are heroes in the kitchens. There's kindness in the seats. There's love in the cups. There's strength in the hands. There's experience in the eyes. There's everything you'll ever need. All you got to do is just open your hand to it and open your mind to it. It'll take you on a journey that's beyond anything you can imagine. You get to be who you always wanted to be. We get to be gentlemen. We get to be strong, we get to be proud, and we get to be useful. We get to be the kind of human beings that we read about in books. And I wouldn't have missed this journey for anything in the world. I especially wouldn't have missed this weekend for anything in the world. What you've got here is really extraordinary. And probably you who have been coming here a long time got an idea of it, but you probably don't have a full idea of it. I've never seen such kindness, such concern for other people as I've seen here this weekend. It's just wonderful. It's just really wonderful. I don't have anything more to tell you about who I am. Take what you can use and leave the rest. I know we'll meet each other again as we trudge the road of happy destiny. And in the meantime, God bless you and keep you. Thank you.